you know, of course, session going on right now. Sorry, I forgot to hit record. Thank you. And practical tools compliance. If Libby could wave, she's going to be doing the next session. So welcome from California, Libby. And then there's a think tank we have tomorrow morning. And then future dates, May 23rd and June 20th. Sandy's going to set up some training or give training during that time for using the governance tool that Libby's going to show you during the next session. We might get into...
Just a little bit of background for folks who don't know. Some of us know standing for a long time. Some people may not. Standing used to be either CIO or CTO or tech director, something like that, at Sumner and at Federal Way. She was a board member for ACPEnw, so she's very familiar with our group, our environment. She's been working down in California for a while, since she's at San Francisco Unified now, and she has a lot of familiarity with the student data privacy tools and the concepts behind there. So Sandy will be great. And Libby is with Seth, the California Educational Technology Professionals Alliance. Dang! 80%. That's a good solid fee for me, right? And California, we've stolen a bunch of our stuff, our documents, our approach, and things from California. So Jim and I will say a bunch of things that are wrong, and Libby will clean up after us. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Yes.
Repurpose.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
All right. So some of this is just Beaverton centric. I'll at least call that out. I'm sure no other district has these problems. So take, for example, this. Why do we want to do this privacy stuff? So you get these confirmations, and I have read and agreed to the terms and conditions. So the teacher goes in and downloads some app, and they want to roster it. Yeah, sure. They download it, and they want to give it to all their kids. And they have just obligated the school district to the vendor's terms and conditions that have nothing to do with our real terms and conditions. So that's a problem. Another problem that we have in our school district is card purchases. Including software. So principal or teacher convinces principal, I want to go buy example software. They use their P card to do that. Purchasing didn't know anything about it. The expense is done. We have no terms and conditions wrapped around that, and they just obligated again the district to whatever those were. Signing, we have the wrong people all the time signing contracts. There's like 3 people or 4 in our school district that can sign contracts, but other people think it's okay for them to do that with the vendors. That is also, for us, a problem. Again, I know that would not happen.
One additional problem that we have in North Shore, and you probably have this one also, kind of relates to P cards, but is somebody will license software as an individual and not as a school district person, right? And then we'll find out about it because they'll come and ask for reimbursement for ABC software that I've just licensed. I'm using it in the classroom because I thought it'd be easier if I did it this way. So there's a couple of problems there. One is, nobody's looked at these terms and conditions to determine if it's valid, and even if they are, you're now collecting that data as an individual, not as a representative of the school district. I don't care if you're the superintendent. You don't have, as an individual, rights to that information. You can't be the license holder for that data. So we got 2 things we got to do. One is, I got to stop you right now from whatever you're doing until we make sure that this software is okay for us to use. And the second is, I got to go back to this vendor and say, I got to change the licensing on this. Alan Miedema, citizen of the state of Washington, can't be the license holder on this. It has to be Alan Miedema as a representative of North Shore School District has this. And that is a super fun conversation to have with your athletic directors. I don't know if you've ever had to do that. Oh, and until then, you're not getting your $100 back.
Yeah.
That is also super popular.
So I was chatting with Converge One, I think it's Robert Red last night, and we were talking about student data privacy, and he had went ahead and shared with me this slide from COSIN. So 60% of breaches include student data. Some of landed on the dark web, so obviously that's a problem, and one of the reasons why we're to do this work. The prior privacy session next door, I know there's lots of security and privacy at this conference. Great to highlight this year. The purpose behind agreements and the alliance, if you will, to provide that framework that we can all work from. It abides to FERPA and all other laws, but this is expensive work. In Beaverton, we have a bunch of people in IT that are wrapped up in this right now, trying to move it forward. People from teaching and learning, our inside district attorney, and it is an expensive process. And the work we do, we want other school districts to be able to leverage that, especially with the ability to share the agreements. And Alan will explain a little bit more about those agreements later. Who else is involved? There's 22 statewide alliances, all those in green. The yellow ones are looking at getting on board. So that's kind of the roadmap for what happens at this point. It started over here in Cambridge Public Schools and is spread, and California, shout out to Libby and team. We really have leveraged a lot of their work. Their data privacy agreement was for Oregon and Washington.
And do folks understand, well, maybe we should just blow through really quick.
Go ahead.
The idea behind the model contract and why we have that set up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll assume that there's some people in the room who don't understand that. So right now, North Shore right now, we've got on the books, I've reviewed something on the order of like 270 different agreements, right? Which is a lot. And I probably have only done 10% of what's actually gets used in the district, between free guard kind of stuff. Those agreements are all different, right? And I'm not a lawyer. I don't, I do the best I can, but I could probably do a pretty poor job at this, and people in the room probably do about as good as I do on this. And we don't have an attorney, right? North Shore has no counsel whatsoever. So the idea that came out of Steve Smith in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he was here a couple of years ago, was you flip this whole concept around and say, we're not going to be reading your privacy policies anymore. We're going to write one that works for us. Vendors, if you're going to do business, you guys are going to sign this. You've got attorneys. I don't. I'm going to have one attorney one time help me with this, and that's going to be our basis, and we'll build it from there. Well, that's a great idea, right? So it started moving across the country, and other people developed this idea. So that's the concept in a nutshell behind Student Data Privacy Group, is that we'll have one contract, we send it out to the vendors, they sign that. They also sign a portion of it called extension or agreement E or
Exhibit E.
Exhibit E, thank you. But then allow everybody in the state to sign off on that same agreement, thereby making it simpler for everybody. So that's the basic concept behind it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that we didn't jump over somebody who didn't understand that piece of it.
So like in Beaverton, we have signed agreements with, I don't know, there's about 35 or so now, but take CSAR, Dreambox, many of you might use those. We have a data privacy agreement with them. There are no modifications to that agreement. They sign E, which Exhibit E means you don't even have to necessarily have a privacy discussion with them. If you use that software, you can just execute Exhibit E with them and you're done, and they've already agreed to all the terms and conditions. So,
which is really, that's the beauty of the model contract, right? Is you guys understand at one time, Jim tells you, hey, Seesaw signed off on the agreement with maybe like 3 changes or something. If you're in agreement with the base agreement, sign Exhibit E. Now you know what contract you've got. It's the same contract you've got with everybody else, and you're on board with Seesaw, and Seesaw's agreed to these terms. Your life is a lot better.
Yeah.
I hope.
Who has reviewed this? And Alan might have more, but as the agreement was birthed, again, it sort of, for us in Oregon and Washington, started out of California. In district, our purchase legal counsel looked at it in conjunction with CESPA in Washington. They looked at it. Mark Williams, F3 Law, and reference. They've been great partners, tremendous partners in this effort, helping us and coaching us on, hey, vendor X wants to submit some modifications or red lines to the agreement. Do you want to include those or not? And coaching us on what we should or shouldn't do from ours. The Department of Ed looked at it. And as this agreement started in Massachusetts and moved across the country. Attorneys all across the country have been vetting this, and so it's really working quite well at this point.
And for folks in Washington, it's largely the same agreement that we've got in Washington and Oregon. A little bit changed because the laws are a little different in the two states. Mark also crafted our basic agreement. And then we also had Katie Love from Hale Gates looked at it and vetted the agreement. And also for folks in Washington who are familiar with the Washington State Risk Management Pool, Bill Conrad from Craig O'Donnell and Gillette, I think it is, reviewed it also. So Washington State Risk Management Pool has signed off on the concept as well.
All right. So I think, was this where you were going to pick up, actually, and dive into the agreement?
Well, go ahead and get started. I'll just jump in.
The privacy agreement, it's long, comprehensive. It definitely has a lot of information about protecting data. What do you do when you're no longer going to partner with that company and you need to have your data removed or de-identified? De-identified for sure, but have them delete it and purge it from the system. It is somewhat of a contract, but it lists in there, and Alan will get into some of these details, why you're using it, what data elements from your SIS or system are you going to move into that software, and now the contract itself.
Yeah. So I would say that one of the most important parts of the agreement, at least for me, is the portion where they're listing what are the actual data elements that we're using. Very few of the privacy agreements actually really enumerate. Here's the data that we're collecting. They'll say things like demographic data, including first name and last name. And I think, well, there's a lot of demographic data. Oh, I'll just put that in my pocket. How about that? Demographic data. That, right? So you want to get a listing of what those things are. That's very helpful. The portion of the document that describes how do we end this relationship is an important one also. That's something that usually in privacy agreements you don't see described, and that's described also. Some of the vendors, when you talk with them, will push back a little bit because it is a big document, right? But it's supposed to be one document that describes every possible scenario you might have with a student data privacy agreement. So if you look at a vendor that I'm working with right now on this, athletic.net, your track teams probably use this. You maybe haven't looked at the privacy policy. Don't look at it. It's terrible. So we're working with these guys right now. But his first reaction was, oh, this is much longer than I thought it would be. And I said, well, in your case, probably about 70% of it doesn't really apply. You can skip over those portions, but I need to have a model agreement that applies across the board. And by the way, your agreement was like 3 paragraphs, which doesn't really cover anything. So that conversation started off rough and has got a lot better after that. I'll just leave it at that. So one of the first in Article 1, one of the things that we ask right away within the document is, what data am I giving up? Now, this actually is data that you are, depending on how you read the law, you're obligated to already be posting this on your website. I would say with pretty good certainty that maybe one school district in this room is doing that. I think Jennifer does some of that kind of stuff down in Auburn, does a pretty good job. I know we don't do a good job on that, on saying here's all the data, here's all the different...
I'd say we do the best we can.
Yeah, but in Auburn, the best you can do is a hell of a lot better than the best we can do. We're kind of limited there. Okay, but yeah, but that is actually one piece of information you're supposed to have, and that's a question that I think is reasonable for a parent to ask, and I think most of us don't have a good answer for that question. So this helps us answer that question. Also says, what's the actual service that I'm going to get for this? Vendors has to describe that for you as well. That's right at the beginning of the document that you'll see that portion of it. And then, yeah, at the end there it says, here's the data that we actually collect, and that's useful. If you go to the tool, we can display those things for your parents also. Article 4, vendor restrictions and duties. That's where we really get into where we describe, here's what the vendor is permitted to do with this data, what they can do and what they can't do. You know, you can use it, really, what it boils down to is for the educational purpose for which we contracted with you in the first place. And everything else you want to do with this data, like marketing or advertising for it, or again, in the case of some of the athletic tools that you guys probably all sign off on like we do, what you can't do are things like, I'm going to use these kids' pictures to market my product, right? Huddle, crossover. If you read their agreements, they all say things like, hey, once I got an image of your kid, I get to do whatever I want with it. And then you look at their website someday and you say, hey, that's a North Shore School District kid advertising these guys' product because they've got this picture and now they've decided to slap it on the front page of this thing, which is not an okay thing for them to do, but you just signed an agreement that says that that is an okay thing for them to do. So this section defines what you can do and what you can't do with this. This is an area where you'll get some vendors who will start pushing back on you in terms of, do I want to sign this agreement or not sign this agreement, and want you to start making some modifications to the thing. This is an area where I would be very, very careful about what I let them strip out of here and not strip out of here. Freeware vendors that you work with, this is where they make their money, right? They give you free software. Not really free. They're going to collect a bunch of data. They're going to do something with it to make money because these guys all have mortgages. They all have car payments. They're not getting those needs met by giving you free software. What else do we have on there? Yeah, unauthorized. Good. That's good. Disposition. Yeah, that portion is in here where we define how are we going to sever this relationship when we finally separate. What do you have to do with the data? How are you going to notify me of it? How am I going to notify you of these things? That's an area that most privacy statements don't even speak to. And I don't know if it has to be in the privacy statement, but this is a good place to define the relationship that you're going to have with the vendors. Okay, that's good. Data security, again, this is a place where you get some pushback from the smaller vendors because now we start talking about things like you have to perform a regular audit of your services. You have to do things like a cert that you've had somebody look at these practices. Where are you actually physically storing this data? Is it in AWS? Is it on a server that sits underneath your kitchen table? Where is this stuff actually physically located? We've gotten some pushback on these areas around, and this is actually a place where I think they've got some good points where vendors have said, I don't want to get into the level of detail exactly describing how we secure your information because some of that stuff is sort of confidential and secret. We'll attest to the fact that we do this, but I don't want to enumerate all my security policies for people that's going to be in a document that's posted up on a website. I think that's probably a pretty good point. So we've given a little flexibility in those areas. Security and subprocessors, we talked about that. Oh, the one thing I will say there is you'll find out, and this is a little scary, a lot of these vendors don't even know who their subprocessors are, right? They hire these services out to some folks, and when you say, well, who's actually performing, like building your web page for you? I don't know, it's some company I signed up with. Well, what are their policies and agreements? I don't really know.
Or they don't even want to be accountable for them.
Or they don't want to be accountable, right?
Not our problem. We handed it off. It's their problem now. Well,
right. No, you know, this is an area where we've got a little difference between Washington and Oregon's, and I actually like this piece that we added in Washington. Is we said you've either got to do one of two things: either your employees have to have training on proper handling of data and on their, like, accessing on their personal device and securing things on their phone or things like this, or you've got to just prohibit them from doing this altogether and entirely, because everybody works so much on their personal mobile devices now. These vendors do also, and we say either, and ideally, you tell your employees they can't do that, or you've got to have some kind of way that they're encrypting that information when they're working with this on their personal device. And we've gotten some pushback on those kinds of things also, but that's actually been nice because it's helped us be able to enter into the conversation with vendors about, hey, this is a big security hole you've got in your product. If you've got somebody who's working on your software with our data from their kitchen table at night across their own network, that's kind of a security problem that you guys should be thinking about. Jeff?
So the Washington Super Act, give you the kind of legislative backing for that also?
Yeah. Yeah, well, so the Super Act, if folks in Washington aren't familiar with it, just Google RCW, Super, and Privacy, and it'll pull it up here. It's 28A something or other. And it's actually a pretty clear document. And as Jeff mentions, it gives you some pretty clear direction that you can point vendors to and say, here's about 15 things you need to be doing or attest to me that you're responsible for if you're going to do business with the state of Washington. It's kind of like they took COPPA and made it apply to all kids, regardless of age, and also apply to nonprofits as well. Because COPPA only applies to kids that are under 13, and if the vendor is a for-profit, right? Because Federal Trade Commission is what governs that. So universities and nonprofits aren't actually subject to COPPA. When I'm talking to like Oregon about Swiss, I don't always tell them that part though. Let them think that they're on the hook for it instead. It's nice. Well, I mean, there's lying to people and then there's not telling them information, right? Okay. Let's see. I think we've talked about that. Oh, data breaches. We've got some language in there that says if you have some kind of data breach, you have to tell us about this. You have to give us some information, and here's the way in which you're going to inform us about this. This is also an area that most privacy agreements you look at are silent on. So this is good to have. This also gets to that manual piece that Jim was talking about. Gets the vendor to think a little bit about, well, what are my processes here? What is it I'm doing? Especially with the smaller companies, it's good to get them thinking about these types of things.
Does that have a time frame of when they are supposed to notify you?
Yes, within the agreement itself, yeah, there's some language. I think it's, I forget what it is.
I want to say 3 or 5 days. I can't remember.
Yeah, but there are some language. What'd you say it was, Logan?
Ours is 48 hours.
48 hours, okay. Ours is probably 48 also then.
Honestly, so that's one of the only deadlines I've been making, but I've allowed to adjust it to 72 hours if anybody's requested to allot for a weekend or 3 days
Okay.
weekend holidays. But it's a very short window because all they have to do is notify you.
Right.
If they don't have to clean it up by that time frame, you have to be notified by that.
But it also follows with the obligation of us reporting it for like HIPAA and other types of
Right,
things.
right, yeah. So that's the argument is that districts are bound by other stringent laws in addition to this, because they have to be bound by that very short window to notify the law. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought I saw another hand. Let's see. Okay, I think we covered that. Oh, Exhibit E. So this is really the meat. This is where people will hopefully end up saving themselves a bunch of time here. We talked earlier about Exhibit E. The idea, again, behind Exhibit E is once North Shore has negotiated an agreement, like let's say with WeVideo, because we negotiated an agreement with WeVideo. Anybody in the state of Washington who then wants to be part of that agreement, all you got to do is go out to the website as soon as I get the contract loaded, which I haven't done yet because I got other things I'm doing right now, but I will get it done. If you sign off on Exhibit E, which you then and then send it to WeVideo, you now have the same agreement in place with WeVideo that North Shore has with WeVideo. So both those pieces of information are posted up on the website. All you do is download Exhibit E. It's a one-page doc. You fill in the information for yourself. It's got the email address, the physical address of who at WeVideo you want to send this to. Scan it, send it off to them, and you're done, and it's all working. I got to do my first Exhibit E just the other day. I don't think Rochelle's in here, but Monroe worked an agreement with TCI, and North Shore signed off on it because I knew our contract was coming up, and I said, well, I don't want to have to negotiate with them again. I think Rochelle already did this. She had. I signed Exhibit E. I sent it off. Within about 3 hours, I got an email back from them, said, yep, we've got it. We filed it. You're good to go. And that was it. It was super simple.
And I know that Gary just did it with School Data Solutions as well. So
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I got the info from Joe Danziger there. So
Oh,
I haven't
excellent.
signed mine yet, but I'm ready to.
Okay, so we got School Data Solutions is on board. I just said we got TCI, we got WeVideo, we got Seesaw, and I'm back this close to McGraw-Hill with all their products and getting them signed off also. All I got to do is I just got to do a little write-up there and send it off to them, and that'll be done. So that'll be nice, too. Yeah.
Is there a list for vendors
Yeah, there is up on the website. Yeah, well, let me. Is that a portion here? Whoops. Well, you go. Well, yeah, we'll get to that, and we'll show you where you can see all of this. So, support and training. Jim talked earlier that we're going to have some training set up for if you want to be able to use the tool so you can start posting your contracts, getting them up there. How do you access this information? Those two trainings Jim mentioned earlier. We can send that link, that information back out to folks. I think Sandy sent everybody that email, though, also. So Sandy will lead those trainings. That'll teach you both a little bit more about the contract and how do you manage the contracts. Both Washington and Oregon are on board with this, so you guys are all covered by this. One of the questions is always, well, how much does it cost? Doesn't cost anything. Okay, WSIPSI's paying for Washington's portion of it. ACPE is paying for Oregon's portion of it. You might have to do, a little time of your own investment on it. There's a lot less time than you would have had before. Jeff? Is it an annual? It's an annual, yeah. It's.
I covered the first year, remember, so I don't think it's fair that ACPE would cover Oregon in perpetuity and somebody has to cover Washington. We need to get that part figured out before we move it.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get that figured out. The annual is $500 per state, so it's $500.
I have that in chips.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get that. We'll get the $500 worked out. Stuart.
And I think Sandy's working on some sort of training for business managers and non-tech folks who may have a piece in the contracting game.
Is she?
I hope she is, because I think I put in a request for something along those lines. The initial training's great for tech and helping getting the contracts up and how you do the mechanics of it, but also the informational piece that needs to get back to the business managers and helping them understand why, and the decision makers in teaching and learning about why we're.
Oh, sort of the how do you talk to people about the need to have this stuff?
How do you talk to them, and also why do they care? Right?
Yeah. I don't know that Sandy's working on. That'd be a great thing for her to work on. We could talk about that also. Want to see what's already out there? Are we live? Can you just jump out to any of them?
I will in just a sec. What I wanted to talk about just before we do the demo, though, is exactly what Stuart was talking about. So what's practical in the school district? So when we started this, we were kind of learning from scratch and certainly did not have a lot of experience in this, working with vendors. We were new to the tool. Fortunately, I reached out to Seesaw first. I just thought, hey, let me try this. I'm going to key a record into this system, and then I'm going to reach out to Seesaw. Unfortunately, they wrote back immediately within like 2 hours. Said, yeah, we'll sign that. And like 4 hours later, I actually had the signed agreement, and it was done. And I thought, God, this is easy. There's not going to be much to it. Yes. And then, lo and behold, the next one goes out, and it's like red line to hell. And then you got to involve, okay, this is like they've just beat our agreement to death. Are we going to, now school district, we need to talk about this. And then we started researching our apps, and one of our guys did an inventory on just the apps off of Chromes and our iPads, and he came up with a list of 1,600. And I'm like, oh my God. And then, so we started with some of the big apps, Dreambox and, like I said, Seesaw and some of the others. So we started doing agreements with those, and there were a few vendors we've had resistance from, and we've been actually negotiating for almost 5 months on some of them, BrainPop being one in particular that we struggled with. But it's working with teaching and learning and working with the purchasing department. We forged a really good relationship in purchasing where they don't just blanket approve things to go through. Oh, certain school wants to buy a piece of software, it goes through, they have the money, they pay for it, it's done. Or the P-card thing. As a school district, we're going to block, accounting has done this now, they're blocking P-card purchases of software. You can't actually do that. So we're trying to drive people into this process, but working with our teaching and learning department, it's been a little bit of a struggle. We're getting there. Initially, they said, well, if a teacher requests an app, we don't even want to look at it until you've decided in IT if it meets the data requirements of a normal rostering solution that we have. And it's like, well, really, I don't want to do all that IT work if you don't approve it to be used in the classroom in the first place. So we need to work a little bit better together on that. So I asked Mark if he would come and maybe just speak to about what Highline's done, because they're a little bit further ahead than where we are for these groups, communications, purchasing, teaching and learning, working together with IT on these solutions. So mind sharing a little bit?
Sure. So number of years ago, we actually created an internal process, digital tool review process. So if you're a teacher and you're looking for an application, you can go online, you can fill out a process. You can actually find that process on our website. So just go to highlineschools.org, and there'll be a bunch of circles down at the bottom. Click on the digital tools circle, it'll take you to that. When you get there and you can go through the process, you'll see a series of items related to, one, it's been approved, it's been, no,
All the way down.
go up. You are up. Right there, digital tools, blue one. Okay, so inside here, so these are the tools used. So you actually have to search for digital tool review. But in the digital tool review, when you do it, the process is we go through, we determine through teaching and learning, technology services, and communications whether or not those tools are accepted. And then those tools get listed on the page right there, digital tool review process. We list why it's not approved or why it is approved. So if you scroll, review digital tools, sorry, the box right there. So there's approved, conditional, denied. Why don't you go ahead and click on a denied button. And then just click on Class Dojo. A lot of people have Class Dojo. We don't allow it. These are reasons why we don't allow it. Well, you know what? This takes a lot of time to build this and to keep this up. And I don't know how many of you are remember John Doney. John's sitting back over here. John works for a company called Learn Platform, and Learn Platform now has all of this already done, and it's tying into A4L, Project Unicorn, and a lot of this. And so the cost that we went in developing all this is now going to transition over into really purchasing this application and running this application, because I don't know how many thousands of applications are out there, but it seems like Learn Platform has most of those identified, and they give academic review of the application. They give technical review of the application. They give legal review of the application. And what we do is we apply the A4L for Washington. You know, so what I've learned through Alan. We also have our own agreement that we say if you're going to use an app in our district, you have to sign our agreement. If you're not going to use, you don't want to sign that agreement, we're not going to use your tool. And that's tough, you know, because we're taking a stance. And we're also saying it's not your data inside that tool, it's our data, which means you can't use any of that data for anything outside of us, because that data really is PII information. We want to keep that protected. So the whole process is to go through that. And we're in the midst of transitioning right now this off into Learn Platform. But if anybody's interested in the process, you know, I've got NDAs, I've got all kinds of documents related to this that we put together over time. Katie, you want to raise your hand? So Katie back there works for me. Katie is the director of data integration and visualization in our district, and her job with the project manager and myself is to sit in those meetings. So we sit in a monthly or every 3-week meeting, and we review tools with teaching and learning. There's 3 to 4 people from teaching and learning, and then communications. And we don't sign off on any agreements unless we all agree. So it's very important that we agree. And then we find the things that key cards try to buy. We find the things that PTSA buys. PTSA buys a lot of stuff. And then we look at applications that are running on machines. Our biggest concern is what student data is made into those apps.
You have the, oh, there it is. Jim, could you bring up the SDPC? Well, the question earlier was, how can you see the list of apps that have already been approved? I'll walk you through that piece of it also. So this is the basic website. Did you bring up the general one, or?
This is the general.
Okay, this is the general one. So let's say, for example, that you are interested in let's say I'll say Brain Pop, because we were already talking about that. Seesaw. So we'll look for Seesaw. So can you go back, just go back one real quick. So this is the SDPC website, sdpc.a4l.org. Links in the presentation. We've sent it out before. A couple of things here. If you just want to search and see what's out there, you can just search the database. So just get started. And then you can break it down by state, by company name, by district, grade level, resources, and different things. If I was just going to look for Seesaw, what I would probably do is go over to search by resource and find Seesaw on the list. So this gives you an idea of how many different products have been reviewed by somebody someplace in the country. At this level, we're looking at the national level. And Jim found Seesaw. So we're going to click search. And we can see down below, hey, there's a bunch of people who have reviewed Seesaw. We can see that Capistrano Unified, Cupertino Unified have reviewed it. And what we see here, those are obviously California districts. You can see it's active. They've signed the California agreement. Here's the Exhibit E. Here's where it was approved. Here's when it expires. And they've got some of the information over the right for you also. So that's good. Now, even though this isn't Washington, this is good because Jim talked earlier about Seesaw when they signed on board. If you were to write a vendor who's already signed off on this agreement, they've already got the concept. You don't have to explain a bunch of stuff to them. McGraw-Hill actually reached out to us because they knew we were interested, and they'd signed this someplace else. And they said, hey, we're doing business in Washington. We heard you guys have got the model contract. Can we get that thing signed so we can just make everybody's life easier? And I said, yes, we can do that. So if you wanted to actually see the agreement, you just click on the link, and there's California's agreement. Looks like Lodi was the original district that signed it. You scroll all the way down to the bottom on this, and you'll see where Exhibit E is. A little bit further. There's C, I saw go by. D, and there it is, last page. So all you would do here, so what they did in this case was they printed out this copy, signed off on the agreement. This is the Seesaw folks up here. Here's the local people at the school district. Signed that off, sent it in, one page. The whole thing is done. They load it up to the website, and now everybody can see. I think in this case, was this like Capistrano or somebody? But that district is now signed off, and you can see them on the list. Now, it was Dry Creek. Maybe you're looking at this list and you're saying, well, that's good. It's nice to see that Seesaw conceptually is on board, but is there anybody in Oregon who's already on board or Washington who's on board? If we go back one, you can search by state up at the top and see, well, let's just look at Oregon, because maybe you've got yours loaded. And you see, I want to see who has signed off on this agreement in the state of Oregon. And here you can see the list here. You see Amplify, and maybe I'm looking for Seesaw. Have you guys got Seesaw loaded already?
Yeah.
There we go. And if you're an Oregon district now, click on the link. You can see the agreement that's in place. Scroll all the way down to Exhibit E. Just print off this one page. Fill in your information here. Send it to Allison Murphy. Her contact information should be in the document there someplace. Send it off to Allison, and now your district is signed up with Seesaw in the state of Oregon with the exact same agreements that Beaverton's negotiated. And it is really that simple to do. So some strategies. Well, actually, I'll stop right there and see what questions folks have. One question should be, well, go ahead, Libby.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So if you're wondering why this one is left blank in that second portion, and the one that you viewed in California was filled out, if you're a subscriber, so there's a difference. Originating district is the very first district to do that back and forth conversation with the vendor. They leave it blank.
Yes, thank you.
The originating district will always leave that portion blank, so that it's easy for you as a subscribing district, anybody second and beyond, can come in, print that at the clean and ready for you to sign and upload your own. So what you read in California was a subscribing district who can sign and upload that document.
Thank you.
It just takes one originating district, yes.
Yeah. Now, if for some reason you want to negotiate a completely different contract, even which state are you in? Okay, but okay. So let's say a Washington district, but you decided for some reason I don't like the agreement that you can negotiate your own. But if you just want to jump on board with Seesaw, what North Shore has already done, you print out that page, fill in the blank information, send it off, and it's all done for you. It's all complete.
And hey, Al,
Yeah.
on the website itself, does it say, does it denote who is the originator versus the subscriber? Is that searchable in there?
If-
It looked like Seesaw had a whole bunch of
Yeah.
contracts signed. How would you find out which was the originator?
Libby, that might be a good. Oh, Jeff.
The first, if you go back to Dry Creek, the first one whatever one you open up, it says Lodi.
Oh, okay.
It told you, so you're going to have the first contract.
Even before you open the document, you can tell because there's an extra link. So,
Oh, right.
So over here where you have ORV1, you can see right there's a contract, and then there's that extra link right there underneath, and that should be
Just the exhibit.
So if it's a subscribing district, it should just have one link, because in the way that the system operates, you don't have to, as the subscribing district, so that district that was seconded on, you don't have to download and upload a copy of the originating contract. We do that for you in the background. So you upload that single page exhibit E, and so long as you upload it correctly, the system knows to automatically tie in that originating contract to your stakeholder through the contract in the system.
So do you have to log into that?
No, that's totally. This part is totally free. I mean, you can go in. I mean, there is a login portion of it if you're going to manage part of the website. But if you just want to see what are the agreements and what's out there, it's free for anybody to get access to and see what's out there.
Are we concerned about crawling to get contact for people who are authorized to make purchases?
I guess it's an issue, but you balance it. Yeah, I get plenty of spam anyways. I don't think this is going to fix it. Trish?
Do you mind just showing real quick how to upload a new agreement? Because there's some options on there that...
I am not expert at that piece yet. Anything that I would show you on how to upload agreements would almost certainly be wrong still at this point. So if the goal is to embarrass me, we could do that. But I can talk to you. Yeah, thank you, Don.
Okay, I'll wait for that.
I can't.
I went to hers, but there's a grid of about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options. Just wondering.
There's two things I do want to show you though before I forget. Jim, I want to.
To answer your question though, in the next session, actually, Libby's going to walk through that.
Perfect.
I could have done one. Alan can't, but that's okay.
Remedial. I'm doing what I can. I'm growing as a learner.
What do you want me to show?
Oh, right here, right where you're at. If you go into any of the SDPC websites at the bottom, let's say you're not signed up yet for whatever reason. Scroll to the bottom, click on Join Us. Go ahead and click on Join Us. And you can select which district you're in. Now, in Jim, let's go all the way back out to the top so I can show them how you pick your state and everything. So go all the way back out to the main website. Yeah, even further. Okay, there we go. So state alliances, let's say you're from the state of Washington. You want to sign up. From the main page, state alliances, pick your option. Scroll all the way to the bottom. Click Join Us. Now you should be able to pick a district from the state of Washington. There you go, Aberdeen, Elmira. Fill out some information, request the account. That's going to send an email to me. I think it also sends an email to Sandy, and we can get your district signed up. I think we've got like 30 or 40 districts in Washington who are already signed up, but the rest of you can jump on board. You want to make sure that you've got this request in before you do your training, right? Because then once you're trained on it, then we'll activate your account and you're off and running. Maria? It could mean a couple of things. Within the tool, and I think Libby will probably show this, you can list not just successful contracts you have in place, but you could say denied or vendor refused, or you can say we've got, we just signed their agreement already and it's approved in some format. You can just sort of list your status with that district. It's also a place where you can look and see like what would be an example? Epic would be an example that I think a lot of people have denied or they've just refused to make any change. That e-book thing that everybody likes, also a company with not a great agreement, I'll tell you that. And also not a company who's much interested in changing their agreement. So I'm a little freaked out by those guys. Yeah, because it's basically a free tool, but they don't want to make any kind of modification to their agreements. That makes me a little suspect. Yeah, if it's free, you're the profit margin. If you want, Jim, can you scroll down to the bottom? The other thing I wanted to show you. What is the agreement? Go into your state agreement, look at the bottom. You can download what the agreements are so you can read the contract yourself. You can get it in it's PDF format. There's Washington's agreement. You can read through the thing. Libby will show you how we're going to end up filling these things out, sending these things along. Vendors invariably will want to negotiate of it. Okay, so the problem, I should leave this here. I think that then for the next district that comes on board who wants to sign off on it, my question is, how have we modified the agreement? The power is in having that base agreement that I know what's there. I don't have to read the whole thing. But if North Shore's negotiating with Spring Pop, then when Elmira is coming on board, how do they know what the changes are? Strategically, what I've said is I've told vendors, no changes to the base agreement. Base agreement is going to stay how it is, no matter what changes we make to it. We're going to attach a document at the end that describes all the changes. So we'll say, here's your base agreement. I attach an addendum, I just call it Addendum 1 to the bottom, where I say, for our purposes of our agreement, we scratch under section 4.1 this paragraph and replace it with this other paragraph instead. That way, when the next district comes on board, you can scroll to Addendum 1 and you can just see all the description of what all the changes are, right? And whether as a district you want to sign off on those modifications or not. Maybe what works for us, doesn't work for Bethel, and they say, I can't sign off on this. But it's easy for you to find. If you just change the document and load it, it's very difficult to figure out within this 50-page document, well, where did it change? Where did we change may to shall, or vice versa? Other questions?
I kind of run into a couple of situations on trying to define the scope of how far we use this document for. And to clarify, like the state of Washington, for example, wants our student data for immunization records.
Yeah.
And they have a data sharing agreement that they want us to sign. Pierce College wants us to share student data with them. So this is more geared toward vendors.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts around using it for other agencies, like the state agency, like other colleges, other educational institutions, those kinds of things?
I think it's a great idea, but we didn't build it or build this model with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same concept of having a base data sharing agreement that we're all going to use and then just modifying it slightly from there, I think it's a great one. I know from work that we do with Children's Hospital, you would think Children's Hospital, big organization, they must have a great data sharing agreement. I don't think they even knew that data sharing and agreement, that those three words ever went together, because they said, can you give us a whole bunch of health information about your kids? We absolutely can. Where's your data sharing agreement? I said, I'm a nurse. I do not know what you're talking about. Well,
So I'm kind of hearing that the scope is really for vendors, and then you turn to more of a traditional data sharing agreement for other agencies.
But I don't see any reason why the same concept couldn't extend to that.
Libby,
So we're in ESD, we use it with our districts, and we also asked UW, because our SPED department was looking to use a tool, a research tool up there. We handed it back, that same agreement back to them and said, hey, can we review this instead of your 6-paragraph data sharing agreement? And I'm just waiting to get feedback on it.
So give it to them and see if they'll sign it.
Well, I wouldn't give them the base contract. I would craft like your data sharing agreement, and we could craft one, across the state and say, this is our base data sharing agreement. Mark's got some good documents.
Yeah, that came around on ACPEnw a while ago. But
Maybe you had something?
I think, so you guys look like you're using copies of our version 1, but we have version 2 in California now, and one of the additions to version 2 was that Exhibit F is what we call it, and it's a blank exhibit, but it's for any security features on either side. So in that case, I would say you could probably add in that extra addendum and like add in there what security elements specific to those health records or SPED student records. If it's not something that's already directly addressed in the agreement because it's a little bit off what the original scope was created for, that addendum, that exhibit F can be added, and you can also detail out very specifically between the two parties what additional security features you're requiring or requesting on either side.
okay.
So, Libby brings up a great point there, is that California, you guys are now on your second version of the agreement. So these contracts across the country are continuing to evolve, right? California's first version, remember Mark Williams wrote California's, he also wrote Washington's, he also wrote Oregon's. California's version 1 preceded ours. Washington and Oregon's version 1 was based on California's with the refinements that they learned over the course of a couple of years of what are some things we should add to this. California's version 2 then, Mark was telling me, is largely based on the changes that we made for Washington and Oregon, but improved at that one level again. I anticipate we will keep finding refinements and improvements to this. Mark just mentioned ADA compliance, right? That's not something that we thought of when we built this. Getting a portion of this added in to say that a vendor is going to assure us that they're going to be ADA compliant and be certified and stay that way would be a great addition to add for Washington version 2 when that piece comes out. I think that'll continue to evolve. I also think what's going to happen is that the contracts will start looking more and more like one another, and hopefully, as you move from Washington to Oregon to Texas to Massachusetts, they'll be very similar, which makes it easier for the vendors, which means it's going to be easier for us to get these things signed off on. I think it's going to be a work in progress for quite a while.
And on those same lines, we have a vendor, Pierce College, actually not a vendor, but an agency that's requested FreeMNew's lunch data as well. And that's
easy. Cannot happen.
Exactly.
That's not
you can share as long as their program meets certain federal guidelines. Yeah. But there's a separate data sharing agreement that our child nutrition department manages and signs off on. But
I think there's also some stuff right from the feds that they have to sign off on.
Yes,
also
yes.
To get that kind of access.
It's very tough to get that data.
Yeah, it is.
As it should be.
As it should. There was another point that I was going to make now spaced on it. Probably a really good one. Other questions? And maybe I'll remember. Yeah.
Well, so you're a tiny district and your vendor is not in the Oregon list, but they are in the California list. Because there's only 38 in the Oregon list. How do you proceed forward?
Jim, what do you suggest?
Well, the reason there's very few in that list is because we're just getting started with our agreements. Now, if you remember when we did that vendor search, there was probably over 1,000 resource vendors. So that would be a agreement that you're trying to establish for the first time in Oregon with that vendor. One of the things that we've done is when we approach a vendor, well, we've had to do it for all of ours. We craft a very nice letter. Hey, we appreciate your privacy agreement, but we've gone beyond that in Oregon, and we explain about student data privacy and the whole consortium. and then our Oregon agreement, and we engage them in that conversation for getting it signed the first time as an originating district. So like going back to our Seesaw example, we approached Seesaw, they were favorably in response and signed right away. Now that becomes available throughout Oregon. We need more people to be doing that with more apps so that we can leverage each other's work, because I can tell you I'm not going to engage with 600 people and wait for everybody else to then just jump on board of that work. But that's kind of how it works and evolves.
I can tell you a concept that we haven't gotten off the ground in Washington, but we certainly have this idea of sharing amongst the districts who's all using these different products out there. Because, one small district by yourself, you may feel like, well, I don't have a lot of weight. But if you find out that Portland and Beaverton and Salem and Medford and all these other districts are using it. Also, as a group, if you we're not 1,000 kids, we're 150,000 kids instead, representing 12 different districts. Work on that together. I think there'd be a lot of power in that. It was either Derry Lyons or Chad came up with the idea of doing it in Washington. It's a great idea. I just haven't implemented it yet. Of saying across I think we have like 8 or 10 districts who are working on this. Here are the common products that we use. We approach the vendor as a group and say, hey, we'd like to get you guys on board with this. If you sign this, then we're all satisfied, and you're probably going to get the rest of the state to sign off on this also.
Yeah, we talked about putting like a template packet together or something where you could send out to...
Yeah, why have you not done that, Chad?
Because I'm pretty lazy. Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what Jennifer was saying earlier.
Yeah,
Crazy. Well, who's really lazy because he ain't here is Derry. Derry Lyons.
Yeah, he's not even here.
South Kitsap, so lazy. He's not. He's a good guy.
Another tip when you try and establish those is like the use the database. So when we approach a vendor for their software package, we do a search first and say, you know what, you've signed this agreement in California and Massachusetts with it looks like 22 other school districts. We would also like you to sign ours, which was built off the foundation of the California agreement. And they're like, oh, yeah, we've done that before.
Yeah, the concept there is good. That's a good, solid place to start. I will tell you that the other side of that is when I tried that approach with the folks at Cengage, their response was, this person was not authorized to sign that agreement. So they have the same problems that that school districts have, right? Salesmen who never sign agreements and they never tell anybody, I guess. So that was a fun conversation. I'm sure it was more fun back at the time.
And then there's the vendors that will not sign anybody's, and I can't remember. I was going to say one of the names, and maybe I just shouldn't say the name, but I can't remember it anyway. But the whole consortium knows that everybody's waiting for somebody to break through and get the vendor to sign the privacy agreement.
Are they here at ACPE?
Not at ACPE. They're not here, represented at ACPE, but it's some kind of photo package or something. But they won't sign for anybody. And at some point, Mark does this in highlight. Well, you don't sign it, we're not going to do business with you. We're not going to pay you money for your product if you don't want to do this. You either, in your district, you're going to have that struggle. You're going to have to decide, if you don't want to sign or if you want to make too many modifications to the agreement where the agreement's meaningless, are you really going to want to do business with them because they're not taking it seriously? Right. So.
I wish Rochelle Butts from Monroe's here. She couldn't be in this session today, but she's got a vendor that she's asked me to help her work with. This is exactly that sort of situation where they've said, "Sure, we'll sign the agreement," and then they send this thing back that is just like, "This is reworking our agreement to make it your agreement," and that's not going to work. So. I don't want to present it like every conversation is going to be easy and nice. The Seesaw people were great to work with. WeVideo were a piece of cake. Overdrive was, I think we got Overdrive to sign. They were pretty easy to work with. McGraw-Hill couldn't have been nicer in the whole process. You will, if you go down this path, you will have some conversations with vendors at times that aren't the best. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you about that, but you try to focus on the ones that are a little bit more successful and move forward there, and you'll loop back to them later.
So when
I would echo that. I mentioned the athletic.net folks earlier. That's exactly what the situation was. It was work to get them on the phone to even talk about the concept, because this isn't what these guys got in the business for, was talk to some school district schmo like me and argue about contract stuff. It's not what they're comfortable doing. But once you're able to get them on the phone and talk through it and educate them about what it is we're trying to do, completely on board with one another. But you got to get into that conversation first so you can get past that hurdle. For this particular guy and other guys we've worked with, it's been similar to the school district. It's like, I'm not a lawyer. This thing looks terrifying, and what am I agreeing to? I don't understand it all. So then you just take a little bit of time and you walk the person through it, and hopefully you can get them on board. Or in some cases, like I said, you don't, and you just have to come back around later and try it again. But most people, I'm finding, once you get them on the phone, you put in a little work and you can get it done.
If you have a data sharing agreement that you use now, I don't think there's any real onerous clauses in what we borrowed from California.
No, I don't think there is either.
It's just it's like very legalese.
Right. Yeah, it takes some work to read through it, right? I mean, most people, you look at it and you see that it's a contract and you think, I can't possibly read this or understand it. It's not that bad. Jeff is saying, if you sit down and read through it in a quiet place, put back on your college freshman sort of hat and read through stuff without getting interrupted, it's not that bad.
That's your quiet place.
That's kind of it was my quiet place. I was a hell of a student when I was a freshman.
So a lot of Mark's documents that Alan was talking to and Mark talked to, he's going to load those up to the ACPEnw page for us for this session. Scratch happened to be that vendor. I couldn't think of it.
While you're doing that, just a couple more things where you go into the next place. Just heads up. Don't assume that because, and maybe it's probably completely different in the state of Oregon, I'm sure it is. This might be just Washington. Don't assume because OSPI in Washington has put something on their website and they've said this is a piece of software that we recommend that you use, that they have read anything about the contract. Because especially on their alternative learning, their ALE portion of the website, there's some products they got out there that I would never put in front of a kid or load any student data into. And when you talk to the people down at OSPI, and Peter's here, but he doesn't work for OSPI anymore, so I can go ahead and say this. They haven't had any lawyers review this stuff either. So just because WIAA says you got to use this software, just because OSPI says you got to use this software, Kinco, whomever, you still got to review these agreements. I have yet to see any county, city, state organization where they've had anybody review these contracts for data, for student data privacy compliance. I wish they would, but they don't. That's too bad.
So
Oregon, totally different.
Oh, no, yeah, I don't think we've gone there either. So, yeah. Plug for Libby's session next hour is some great information. She's really going to dive into the tool, show you how to do some of that. One of the kind of the last plug for that is if you do start participating, you can use these tools within your own school district. You can have a public registry, if you will, of all of the products that are in use in your school district and your small district, and you didn't have to invent the wheel and write your own software to do all this. It's free to you as part of Oregon and Washington participating in student data privacy, so that's a great thing. Once you start to register your products on the site, whoops, I picked a district that hadn't started it yet. Let me grab this one here. They will show up, so we can post this on our website. Sorry, one more stab there, Alan. So these are people that we have agreements with. We can put a link to this listing on our own district website. Others can find this information very easily. If I may, I'm going to go to... Okay, this is Cambridge Public Schools. They make use of the tool. They're kind of the inventor of the whole thing. And Libby will go into these different ones. There's requests for resource processes, the professional development, their digital resource list. That's the resource list that I just told you about. So if you want to specifically go look at Cambridge, they have all of their agreements listed here. If it's not approved, they list it. And you'll see they have 298 entries. Now, they've been doing this for a number of years. I wish I had 298 entries. It's going to take several years to build that. If you look at some of the California districts, Oak Grove, yeah, oh my God. I think they cheated and they hired a staff of people to vet these things. You can imagine the work. Libby's work in California as a consortium, they do that. I would, on behalf of the school districts, they help with that. We don't have that in Oregon. I'd love for an ESD, Stuart or Rick, somebody to step up and help us vet these applications. Wouldn't that be wonderful, Don? I think.
I agree.
I completely agree, yeah. So,
I think I just found my work. Does California charge?
Sweet. And the next year.
and accept it. So,
Some states are charging.
I even heard Washington has ESDs, but,
We do.
yeah, nothing. But any help we could get would be wonderful.
But here's where you can see like the not approved. There's a number of ways that you can describe agreement you do or don't have with a vendor. The not approved, of course, can be very useful because it actually says we tried and it didn't work with these guys.
So Jeff, SDPC.
I just want to give a quick. This is project 1 on SDPC. They're working on project 2 and 3 now. Digital tools, the global education privacy standards, so that basically your data would be classified. And if you wanted to pass data, say to Seesaw, it programmatically wouldn't be allowed to take data it's not allowed to have, and that's going to be implemented inside. So it's reasonably priced for districts to join. If it's an interest of yours. You don't have to join A4L to join SDPC. You can. So just get my shameless plug in. Thanks.
You'll notice that all these sites have an A4L as part of the URL up there, and they're just hosting the hardware where this is running. It used to be kind of a slow-running site. You see all the searches and all the pages I've gone to have been pretty quick. Initially, when we first started, it was kind of slow. You go look for Seesaw, and it might take 8 seconds to display. Not the end of the world. But now they beefed up the hardware. They moved it off of a Cambridge Public Schools hosted website to a company-hosted website with a lot of horsepower behind it. Any final questions or statements for now? Questions? All right. Thank you, guys.
Yep.